Gambians continue to express concern over skyrocketing prices for basic food commodities in the local market. The Secretary General of the PDOIS calls for a collaborative fight against infant mortality amid the recent acute kidney injury crisis in the country. And South African authorities are initiating measures to mitigate food wastage in the Rainbow Nation. Well, this and more coming your way on The World Today. This is Eyeafrica TV, and you are watching the World Today News Bulletin coming to you live from our studios in Banjul. Many thanks for joining us. I am Amadou Kante, and now the news in detail. Now, the Russian Federation launched what the leader Vladimir Putin called a special military operation in Ukraine in February of 2022 in defense of ethnic Russian speakers who claimed that they were being prosecuted by the government in Kiev. Now, ordinarily, this conflict would not have mattered to many Gambians, given that both Russia and Ukraine are thousands of miles away. Unfortunately, that is not the case because Ukraine is one of the world's largest suppliers of grain, controlling about 50% of total world trade. Now, the trickling of grains export from Ukraine leads to scarcity and higher prices for the little that is exported. Africa TV's Mafuji Sise has been out and about within the Serekunda area to sound the opinions of Gambians and especially business people on how they have been enduring with the hike in the prices of basic food commodities for the last 9 months since the conflict started and its negative impact on food scarcity in the country. Here's the details in this report.
Mohamed Diko is a Mauritanian businessman. He says his business has been operating in the Gambia for 40 years and business had been normal until 2020 when the COVID-19 pandemic struck, as well as the Russia-Ukraine war in 2022. This, he says, has seriously affected world business, and the Gambia is not an exception because the majority of the goods come from countries like Ukraine and Russia. Mr. Diko also attributes the rise in basic food commodities like rice to the cost of transportation and the depreciation of dollars against major hard currencies like the euro and dollars.
The bag of American rice reached $1,700 in places like Brikama because of transportation, and it's the same reason why different communities are buying it at different prices. Some are selling it at $1,650, which is the price at Westfield. I can say the cheapest price in town is now $1,650, and the highest, which is Saddam, is $2,500, which is far above the salary of the majority of the government employees. This is why many are complaining about the skyrocketing basic food commodity prices. Habiba rice is amongst the cheapest. Some are selling it at $1,650 and $1,675. The government should try all means to reduce the price.
Mr. Diko called on the government to reduce taxes to allow the business community to sell at affordable prices to the ordinary citizens. Pap Gay is another businessman, and he says he's aware that the majority of the world's food comes from Ukraine and Russia, and having war around these vicinities will only bring difficulties not only in food commodities, but fuel, and fuel price keeps on increasing rapidly daily. If this scenario is to continue, where the price of every basic commodity is increased, eventually, even the people in developed economies will also feel the heat. He advised that it's time African countries also look back on their agricultural sector and stop thinking about depending on the Western world, which he says is not sustainable. Africa had the vast lands that can accommodate all forms of farming Why can't our leaders make the best use of these lands and feed its people rather than depending on the white people? It's time our leaders think out of the box and create avenues for better agriculture that is sustainable. The Gambia that has not many natural resources, and its river, which should serve as a means of survival, is also sold to the white people. Then how can the citizens survive? It can only be a dream difficult to achieve. The globalized world is one where economies, cultures, and populations are becoming increasingly interconnected. Some of us are vulnerable because of who we are or where we live, but the reality is that we are all fragile. When someone is left behind, a chain is broken. This impacts not only the life of that person, but ours as well. The Gambia is experiencing its highest level of food insecurity and increased humanitarian needs in the last decade, according to 2021 Comprehensive Food Security and Vulnerability Analysis, which is a national food security survey conducted every 5 years. 2011, critical levels of malnutrition have been recorded in 3 out of 6 regions. The Central River region North is the worst hit region in terms of food security and nutrition, both stunting and wasting in the Gambia. The challenge of food insecurity, malnutrition in the Gambia are complex, interlinked, and multifaceted. Many are blaming this to the Ukraine and Russia war, despite we are living in different continents. This is a problem in the Gambia. This is Eyeafrica News.
A South African food report reveals that about 10 million tons of food are wasted every year in the Rainbow Nation. Now, this says accounts for a third of the 31 million tons that are produced annually in South Africa. Amid this backdrop, a local food redistribution organization has launched an awareness campaign to mitigate food wastage among households. Now, the South African government has also joined the fray to initiate remedial measures against the growing food wastage in the country. Let's have more details of that in this report.
The CSIR report shows that while many people go hungry every day, South Africans waste 1/3 of all food in the country, which amounts to roughly 10 million tons of food annually. According to that report, the average South African household throws away 6 kilograms of perfectly edible food every week.
Most of that food waste happens on the pre-consumer side, though, on farms, within the manufacturing producer space, and in the retail side. But 18% of that food is wasted at household level. So yeah, a huge amount of food that can be prevented from ending up in landfill.
A local food redistribution organization, Food Forward SA, is attempting to cut down food waste by launching a campaign to raise awareness about the problem. The organization provides meals to almost 1 million disadvantaged people across the country.
Our core business is the recovery of edible surplus food from the supply chain. So throughout the supply chain, from farmers to producers, manufacturers, retailers, wholesalers, throughout that food value chain, there are always what we call surplus, although in the sector they call it waste. So we make sure that we intervene, intercept that food at the right time so that we can recover that food and then use that to address the problem of food security across South Africa.
The South African government says it has now developed a range of initiatives to prevent food waste.
Government is dealing with the problem deliberately and decisively, and as it is now, the one good thing that has happened in the South African context, the government is working collectively towards dealing with the issue of food insecurity. It's not an issue that is dealt by one government department, but there is a collective platforms of government to deal with this issue.
The South African government has made a global commitment to reduce food waste by half by 2030.
Where in the continent, stakeholders from different African countries and international organizations within the continent and beyond are meeting in the Egyptian capital Cairo for the city's World Week. with the aim of discussing water management issues in Africa. Under the theme of this year's event, Water at the Heart of Climate Action, some of the participants, including university students, are expected to present innovation on water-related issues, especially in agriculture. Authorities of the North African country are also taking advantage of the Cairo meeting to roll out their initiated water programs. Here's more details of that in this report.
African and international policymakers, financial institutions, international organizers, water and environmental experts are gathering in Egypt this week for the Cairo Water Week. The annual event is seeking to support African countries' resilience and mitigation measures to face water management issues.
Desertification and hunger are the most important issues that Africa faces. Without water, there is no food. Agriculture needs water, so human life needs water. Therefore, the biggest challenges Africa and the world are facing are pollution, desertification, and global warming. We must cooperate to face them.
Cairo Water Week participants will hold talks to set joint public policies for water-scarce countries. Nations will share their success stories of best practices for water management, smart agriculture, and the newest technologies they use. The conference also dedicates time for university students to present their innovations in water-related issues to continental leaders.
Water is really an issue that cuts across all development. We work for agriculture, and for us, food security is very strongly linked to water security. Africa is a very large continent and it has very different areas, but whether you have a lot of water or you don't have, you need to manage it in a very sustainable way.
The conference sheds light on Egypt's efforts in finding a way out of its water poverty crisis. Participants in the Cairo Water Week get to tour domestic projects where Egyptian smart solutions are utilized and government policies are implemented.
Egypt is trying to decrease the gap between available water resources and its increasing needs. That is through water recycling, which represents about 33% from the renewable water resources. In addition, we import water in the form of food products to cover the rest of our deficit. That represents 56% of our water resources.
The fifth edition of Cairo Water Week has dedicated its theme to climate change. With extreme drought waves and excessive floods, the issue has made Africa's water challenges much harder to manage.
In the Gambia, the national discussion on the unfortunate acute kidney injury deaths of children due to the consumption of cough and fever syrups is still making the rounds in and outside the country. The cough and fever syrup are made by the Maiden Pharmaceutical Company in India. Gambians want their president to promptly and urgently take action to establish how the poisonous syrups made their way into the country in the first place, thus leading to the death of at least 70 innocent children. Mariama Cham reports.
It is hard enough to lose a child even through natural causes, but it's even harder if such death is one that could have been prevented but for the negligence of another person. The loss of at least 70 Gambian children to the Indian-made syrups has shocked the nation to its core. In many quarters, the shock has turned to palpable anger directed towards the country's health ministry for what many see as its failure to put in the necessary monitoring measures on pharmacies in the country. Some people even went further to call for the resignation of Health Minister Dr. Ahmadulaman Samate. Now the National Assembly member for Bunuko Kunda, Honorable Yahya Jammeh, has also joined in the chorus and challenges government to be proactive in its dealings with Gambians. He takes a particular snipe at President Barrow for failing to cross-check reports and speeches given to him before coming out in the open and urged the president to ensure this tragedy does not reoccur.
So this is what the president should come up with, a very strict and harsh warning to all the medicine control, whatever. So, because it shouldn't be just like they just give you information, you just come and say. Tomorrow, they will keep doing it. So, Gambia is high time, the president, I'm appealing to him, he has to be very strong and he has to be very strict.
On the question of whether heads should rule, MP Jammeh says the president should be bold enough to take the bull by the horn and let the law take its course on anyone found wanting.
Already, he's the president, whether we like it or not. So, but anything that has to jeopardize the interest of the country, you don't have to compromise that. So you don't have to look at people's eye because of relationship. No. What is wrong is wrong. What is right is right. If you do wrong, the law has to take its course. So this is the only way we can, in fact, he can achieve what he wants for the country. And this is the only way we can also at least, build that trust in him. But if you fail that, it's always a problem as a leader.
Honorable Jammeh called on leaders of institutions to be proactive and be on top of issues in their various domains. He revealed plans to form a task force within his constituency of Bunukokunda alongside the Gambia Red Cross Society, which will go around to make sure that all the mentioned syrups are removed from the pharmacies in the constituency.
For me, as far as I'm concerned, my community, I will encourage them, let them be very careful. And in fact, all the pharmacies that are within Bundu, we are even trying to come up with a task force to work with the Red Cross if we have the mandate to go around and check this medicine. For me, I'm a layman in this, but for the Red Cross, we want to partner with them to go and see whether, and also to use this opportunity to appeal to all the pharmacies that are operating in Bundu or even outside Bundu. If they have this syrup at their disposal, let them dispose it. Let them cease selling it.
The Gambia's Health Ministry therefore needs to swiftly put its house in order and restore people's confidence in its service delivery. One way to do that, as it is being suggested in some quarters, is a reassessment of how pharmacy licenses are obtained and the establishment of stringent controls and monitoring of all medications entering the country. Reporting for Eyeafrica News, I am Yahya Jammeh.
You are watching the World Today News Bulletin coming to you live from our studios in Banjul. This is Eyeafrica TV, and from the report there by Yahya Jammeh. We now take a break and come back shortly. Stay with us, we'll be right back. Welcome back. This is Eyeafrica TV and you are watching the World Today News Bulletin. And once again, many thanks for joining us. And let's now look at the rest of the stories. Now, the Secretary General of the People's Democratic Organization for Independence and Socialism, PDOIS, Halifa Sallah, on Wednesday told the President Adam Barrow late government could have declared a state of emergency immediately after the petroleum oil spillage 4 months back. Now, the former National Assembly member for Serekunda West also said that the death of at least 70 Gambian children could have been avoided if the government had shown a little bit more responsibility. And as you are about to hear in this report, Honorable Sallah also challenged ordinary Gambians to see the fight against infant mortality as a collective effort. Here's more details of that in this report by Mafuji Sese.
As Gambians continue to make sense of what is perhaps one of the worst health calamities in recent times, the death of at least 70 children following their consumption of both cough and fever syrups made by India's maiden pharmaceutical company. The former National Assembly member for Serekunda West, Honorable Halifa Sallah, this afternoon stated that the deaths could have been avoided. Honorable Sallah suggested the establishment of rigorous quality control mechanism for all pharmaceutical products coming into the country. He also opined that a study be conducted to establish what went wrong and to ensure made-in pharmaceutical company pays compensation to victims or their families. In the absence of these measures, the former Serekunda West NAM believe no one should be commended for anything yet.
We must ensure that all medicinal products, pharmaceutical products that are imported must be subjected to quality control and tests. We must therefore equip our agency with the necessary materials and develop in the short run close collaboration with other West African countries so that we build up a regime of quality control and monitoring of pharmaceutical products that come into the country.
The medical practitioner turned politician, Dr. Bai Biram Jan, spoke on the rise of kidney failures in Africa, particularly in countries like Ghana and the Gambia, and lament what he says was the inability of Africans to keep records.
This is a wake-up call. Unfortunately, it's a very sad wake-up call that we've lost right now, talking about 70 children. And we don't know, because 70 children probably is only in the Combo area, West Coast and Banjul area. We don't know what's happening. And rightfully, the Honorable said, there's still some missing syrups. I question, why was this specifically made for Gambia? Why? Who is the businessman who went and said this is only for Gambia? Why? Was it a plan? Was it something that was deliberate? Was it by accident? But overall, it's a fault of we, the Gambians, the government. We are in a very dire situation. Right Honorable said, and I have said it many times, we import 90% of what we eat. We don't know what we eat. Even the very oil we eat, neglecting our oil processing factory here in Sarah, which has been left dilapidated all these years, and yet we export our peanuts. The oil we're having, the Honorable has rightfully said many times, sleeping oil. Very, very bad for our system. The kidney failure is rising. Seriously, is rising in Africa. Ghana especially, I was in Ghana. Senegal, even the Gambia, we don't know because we don't keep statistics. And people die in the villages. Oh, he just died because he has to die. No.
The issue of the price hike was also delved into by Honorable Halifa Saleh. He dismissed the notion of the conflict in Ukraine as responsible for the skyrocketing of price of basic commodities and instead blamed what is happening as due to government policy failure. Honorable Saleh also used the press conference to make some political capital by reminding Gambians that PDOI is a government in waiting and it will always endeavor to scrutinize the dealings of the government in office. Mafuji Sise, Eyeafrica News.
And from the report there by Mafuji Sise, now in other news, in a bid to enhance productivity and afford young people the chance to serve their country, the Democratic Republic of Congo's president has ordered for the retirement of more than 6,000 elderly civil servants to pave way for the fresh skills and staff for public administration. Now, the president's decision have been widely welcomed among young people, with some of them believing it is a time to take the opportunity that is presented. Like many countries in the continent, DRC is also faced with growing challenges of unemployment, especially among young people. Now, let's have more details of that in this report.
The DRC is the second largest country in Africa with an estimated population of 90 million people. Unemployment is widespread due to decades of political instability and conflict. Many elderly civil servants who have reached the retirement age of 65 are still working because the government hasn't paid them their pension. But the president recently ordered the retirement of more than 6,000. The announcement has been well received by many young people.
Compte tenu de cette opportunité qui s'est présentée venant du chef d'État.
When I considered this opportunity that presented itself from the president's decision, I felt I should apply for a job in the public service. I might get lucky and be enrolled. It is a very good opportunity for us young people because we have got the degrees, the talent, and we would love to work for our country.
The government plans to retire 300,000 elderly public servants in the next 5 years. Guy Richard Mazola is a 70-year-old former public servant who is happy about the prospect of receiving his retirement benefits.
That
decision is very good. I compare it to the times that my dad used to work. It was automatic. You didn't even need to ask anyone. Once you turned 65 years, you had to retire and get all the benefits that you are entitled to.
Thousands of aging civil servants like Guy Mazola have been waiting for their pension for decades.
Vous vous imaginez, on était obligé parfois de se réveiller à 5h30.
You can imagine that I used to wake up at 5:30 a.m. every day and be at the office at 7 a.m. and I would leave the office at 10 p.m. for 40 years. I am tired. That's why when I go to sleep, I don't want to be disturbed.
The government wants the new positions filled by young people who make up the largest number of the unemployed.
90% of the active population is unemployed in the Congo. 90% of the active population means that in reality, everybody is unemployed. There is no job creation, neither from the private sector nor from the government side. But the government, being the biggest employer in this country, has a big responsibility in that.
The retirement of aging Congolese civil servants is part of reforms that the government is implementing ahead of elections slated for next year.
Authorities in the Ministry of Public Service say they are finalizing the payment of retirement benefits to the retiring employees in a bid to open up job slots. But the government jobs are not enough to go around for the millions of young people seeking employment opportunities, some of whom have already turned to criminal gangs and rebel groups to survive.
Some positive news there for the young people in DRC. Back here though in the Gambia, now Gambia Participated Civil Society Organization has published its report on the government 2020 COVID-19 food aid. The report, which featured more than 1,000 households that benefited from the relief packages delivered in 2020, found that by and large, close to 85% of Gambians' households received the food aid. Mariama Cham tells us more of that in this report.
In April 2020, the government of the Gambia created a food aid relief package at the cost of over $700 million to support families that lost their source of living due to some regulations imposed by the state as a result of the pandemic. However, there have been numerous complaints from Gambians on whether this colossal sum of money was actually all used for the purchase of the said commodities. But most of the criticism of the package was on the manner in which the food distribution was carried out. Gambia Participates is a youth-led civil society organization that focuses on enhancing transparency and accountability in public sector. It went its way to conduct an investigation on the procurement, transportation, and distribution of the food aid across the country, involving over 1,000 households. That report on that investigation has now been released. Yusuf Taylor, commonly known as FlexDan, who is part of the publicity of this report, explains what triggered the investigations on the government's COVID-19 food aid relief.
But with regards to the report, what necessitated it is because of the short period in which the procurement was done and the distribution. Within 96 hours, everything was procured and distributed. So that immediately raised concerns. From the beginning, a lot of the procurement regulations were put aside because of emergency. And that is what really triggered the investigation. And not only that, to see the food that was distributed, they said it's for the vulnerable people, those who are the poorest, those who don't have, those who need.
With regards to the way it was conducted, Mr. Taylor went further to explain the imbalances caused different beneficiaries with different wages.
So what you found is that the report looks at those people who were talked to. About 1,176 heads of households were interviewed in the report, 1,176. And when you look at those guys that were interviewed, most of them you will see that there are different wage brackets which they have. You have all of them organized in different wage brackets, some earning less than 1,000, some earning between 1,000 and 5,000. And when you look at the food, you identify those who received most of it. A lot of it went to between those who had $1,000 and $500 monthly income, when one would have been expecting that most of the food would go to actually those who were earning a little bit less than 1,000.
Mr. Taylor said the report is important, especially to the government, to be able to do well in procurement activities should another pandemic surface.
What this aims to address, first of all, is it tries to look at the emergency regulations and procedures. Because Gambia as a country, this is the first time that we've had to respond to a pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic, which is clearly one of the first that we've ever had to respond to. And because of that, a lot of the procurement regulations were put aside. Procurement regulations are there to ensure that we have value for money, that whatever it is that we're going to procure is going to give value back. So this report identifies how make sure that government can bring in procurement, emergency procurement regulations, that even in case where another virus comes and is attacking the Gambian population, there will be some emergency regulations for procurement, which will be a little bit relaxed than the normal. Of course, that's expected.
The report also found out that 30% of those interviewed thought there was corruption in the distribution process. Another 30% said they don't know if there was corruption, and a third 20% said they have not seen any corruption. With regards to the receiving of the food aid, the report reveals that 85% of the households interviewed said they received the food aid, with about 15% saying that they did not receive. Reporting for Eyeafrica News, I am Yahya Jammeh.
And a report by Yahya Jammeh eventually brings us to the end of this news edition. But for more details on this and other stories, as always, as ever, you can visit on our website on Eyeafrica.tv. Once again, many thanks for the pleasure of your company, and of course, thanks for watching. Stay safe and bye for now.